1310, 92.7 FM, 95.1 FM, The Light, and its management. And now, to address the legal concerns of our community, AM 1310, The Light presents.
Okay.
Good morning. Good morning. This is Nathaniel Lee. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening to our program each and every week. And I also appreciate the callers that call in. We have our superstar panel today, Attorney Vanita Banks, who's a tax expert, cybersecurity. Also, she originally from India, but lives in Chicago. And Attorney Grimes is off today. He's attending a personal matter. But before we get started, I'd like to offer a special thanks to all those folks who showed up for jury duty this week in Marion County Superior Court 5. We had a hard-fought case by very big law firms. They had 5 lawyers defending the case. And it was a hard-fought case, and they made offer settlement, but the jury agreed with us and awarded a verdict of $10,500,000. So we thank them because justice means accountability in civil cases, and in these jury verdicts we've been getting accountability. So thank you all, particularly the foreman of the jury. You outstanding. You asked the right questions, and we appreciate that you paid attention, and all the other jury members. Now, we have a lot of things on the agenda today, but Attorney Banks had pointed out something that's critical. As lawyers, we rely on judges to be objective and unbiased. And so in my last jury trial, we had Judge Shaver, who's the most unbiased judge I ever met. He's fair, he's got great demeanor, and he's fair to both sides. He goes out of his way to try to make sure everybody is comfortable in his courtroom. But the justice on the U.S. Supreme Court have a much greater role of responsibility. They control our future. They control all those hot button issues like abortions, gun control, political donations, you name it, everything that affects our life. And so in the news lately have been Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court. Over 2 decades, he's been receiving gifts from billionaire GOP mega donor Harlan Crow. He went public on Friday to defend himself, and he said, quote, colleagues and others in the judiciary not only blessed his close relationship with the Texas real estate developer, but determined that he did not have to publicly disclose the gifts on his annual financial disclosure statement. Now, legal experts, Democrat lawmakers, and people in the legal community think that that explanation, like you say, the dog don't hunt. Well, they're saying that doesn't make a lot of sense because these questions, a lot of people think that he should be subject to investigation and depositions to see whether or not he violated any criminal codes. Because when a mega donor could, and also the second allegation is that the mega donor purchased his home that his mother lived in, and apparently they paid for some significant upgrades to it. And so when they're on this yacht, is it possible that he could say, what about this case? And, I'll take care of it. It just raises so many questions. And in the democratic system, it just seems flawed. No judge in our county could do that and keep their judgeship locally. But it's just shocking that that's something that's apparently permissible on the highest court in the country. Attorney Banks, I was shocked at the level of benefits given to a sitting judge at any level.
Good morning, Attorney Lee, and thanks so much for having me. Look, this disclosure over the last, week or so regarding Justice Clarence Thomas, just highly, highly disturbing and very, very troubling. And my question is, how did this go unreported for decades. Over 2 decades, Justice Thomas has failed to disclose these lavish trips that have been estimated to be at least $500,000, $500,000, where he and his wife have flown by private jet, and at no expense, funded by this mega GOP Texas billionaire donor. And also, as you mentioned, in 2014, Justice Thomas sold his childhood home to this donor. His mother still lives in the home, and over the past years, this Texas billionaire has spent thousands of dollars on renovating this home. So I am hoping, Attorney Lee, that this is the tipping point. This is the inflection point where there is a call to action on the establishment of a code of ethics for Supreme Court justices. Clarence Thomas is stating that he was not required to disclose these trips under a, quote, personal hospitality from a close friend exemption. At the very least, from my perspective, there is a huge appearance of impropriety here. And certainly at this juncture, and based on this information, there should be a specific move forward toward establishing a code of ethics. There have been calls for the impeachment of Justice Thomas. However, that effort is likely not to be successful. There's virtually no possibility that a U.S. Supreme Court justice could be impeached in this nation. There's only been one prior attempt to impeach a Supreme Court justice, and this dates back to the 1800s, Attorney Lee, when a U.S. Supreme Court justice was at least attempted to be impeached for failure to exclude biased jurors.
Well, here's the problem. There are some legal scholars, and I was in jury trial all week, but I didn't follow all the shows, but seems to suggest that what he may have been doing may be also in violation of the federal criminal code. If he was indicted for a criminal violation, I think that the landscape could possibly change. That we've had some famous cases in American history of lower level judges. One of the most famous judge was L.C. Hastings, who's now deceased, but Judge Hastings was an outstanding jurist, and he was accused of basically being involved in a bribery type scheme during a case, and he was acquitted. They've tried him in the federal courtroom down in South Florida before a jury, and he was found not guilty. But after the trial, they impeached him and removed him from the bench. And after they removed him from the bench, he ran for Congress and he won and he became a U.S. congressman. But the issue, though, is that even though he was acquitted, the system of justice said that he would, be subject to not be able to be a federal judge again. And that's very important because financially, that whole process basically caused him to incur a significant debt. So I was troubled by the fact that a serious lack of transparency. When you go before the judge, now do you say that is he making the decision because of some mega donor who is a, quote, a close personal friend? And then the other thing too, when they say 500,000, I mean, that's ridiculously low he took 10 private jet trips, you know, on a Gulf Stream, round trip overseas will be about $250,000. So I'm not sure where they get this 500,000 if you're taking these trips on luxury yachts and stuff like that. If you rent that stuff, or at least I've seen the cost of it. You know, I have no desire to rent those myself, but it's very expensive. So I was concerned about that. So my whole point is this: if we are going to have a system of democracy, and America got the greatest system of justice in the whole world, but justice requires accountability. And the problem is that if you have someone who can put their thumb on the scales of justice because they have a special personal relationship with a Supreme Court judge, that's just bad for the system. And I think that they need to clear this up and do it fast. This is not a political event, whether he's a Democrat, Republican, Independent. It just right is right, wrong is wrong. And this type of thing that's just, it stinks to high heaven. I mean, it's no explanation that be plausible to say you could do this and not disclose it. You know, so I was troubled by that, Attorney Banks.
Likewise, Attorney Lee. And there was an assertion made in the news that early on, Justice Thomas had inquired about whether he needed to disclose these trips. And he was told that because they, you know, were personal and funded by a close friend, that there was no need to disclose those trips. But again, my question is, how does this go unreported for 20 years?
I don't know. Let me ask you a question. As you know, and we all know that they have all sorts of law clerks that research every issue. And if we have the ability to have any issue thoroughly researched, why would they need to rely on some friend to give them legal advice?
Excellent question. He has access to the best legal research in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not buying it. I am not buying it.
It's a terrible smear on American democracy. But in any event, let's just take a call. Hey, Jack, you have a question or comment for legal issue of today, sir? Hello, Jack? Okay, we lost him. But in any event, well, if you call back.
Pierre is raising some great questions in the chat box.
Our friend Pierre said, how many federal judges went to Jeff Bezos' secret get-together in New Mexico? Who knows? I have no idea. But I think, to answer Pierre's question, though, I think that the lower level federal judges, to my understanding, as a general rule, they fully comply with these disclosures. All the federal judges I know, you know, you go somewhere with them, they won't even allow you to buy their lunch or dinner. And so they say, no, Ms. Lee, you can't do that. I'll take care of it myself. And so, so I've had dinner with a number of federal judges. Not once have I've been able to pay, you know, and so because they all are very cognizant of the fact that they have to do disclosure. And Pierre raised some good questions about this. I don't know, I am concerned. And the fact is that I just think that they need to clear this up and clear it up fast. And then they need to look at all of the donors that made donation and see whether or not there's this correlation between cases that came before the court. With these billionaire guys, they may have a plethora of people in which they have friendship or professional relationship. So, you know, I like to be some investigation to see whether or not any of those collateral friends had any communication with this mega donor and somehow ended up before the court. That'd be fascinating to find out. And that would be a serious issue, but I'll be interested in knowing whether or not there's any correlation. I know it's going to be difficult, but a lot of times when things become publicly known, you see a bunch of people come forward. Like, for example, Attorney Banks, in this Dominican voting case, because it's such a public issue, I noticed when I was looking at some articles last night that now they are sanctioning the Fox News network, and basically because people keep coming forward and they got all kinds of stuff on email, text, and things like that. It's incredible in terms of the stuff that you learn from discovery in that case. Because once the matter get publicity like this case is getting now, there is a good probability, I think, that people are going to start coming forward with some more incriminating evidence.
Absolutely.
Now, having said that, the second case, there's a lot of things in the news today that we need to go over. And one of the things that Attorney Banks was you got the Nashville gun violence, but I think one of the critical thing had to do with the leak document. Wait a second, a couple other things. Renee, as apparently Crow had many of his issues that came before the Supreme Court. So one of our listeners, I'm not sure what state she's from, but she apparently believed there's evidence that Crow had a lot of his relevant issues that came before the U.S. Supreme Court. Really fascinating. I'd like to know which issue they were, and I'd like to see the results of their investigation. I think that's critical. And I appreciate the opportunity for people, if they have information, to come forward. Let's just flesh this out to see whether or not there's smoke, is there some real fire, or whether or not it's just all smoke. I'd like to see whether or not there's any other evidence to support some misconduct. And also, Pierre apparently believed that Merrick Garland is not going to investigate the cases. So, okay, everybody got a lot of opinion. You can also join us on our private line at 463-204-0419, 463-204-0419. Now, the next issue, among any, it was shocking to see a 21-year-old in Massachusetts releasing the government most secret information and putting it on website. I was just appalled at first that somehow some 21-year-old Reserve National Guards person leaked information. And I know that you're an expert in this area. What's your take on this, Attorney Banks?
Well, my question is, how does a 21-year-old guardsman even get access to this information? There's clearly a lack of supervision. Big question as to how do they even, just in terms of the process for gaining access to this information. This exposes a huge vulnerability and a major national security threat, and a failure of supervision and leadership that it needs to be addressed and closed very, very quickly. I mean, this is a huge problem that needs to be fixed.
Well, his name is Jack Teixeira, Teixeira, Teixeira. And he was a 21-year-old National Guardsman in Massachusetts. Currently lived about 60 miles south of Boston in Dighton, Massachusetts, a town of about 8,000 folks. And he was arrested this week. Of course, an arrest don't mean that you're guilty in America. But based on the news report, and some of his people, they had some website that he released information, allegedly releasing information. And and apparently somebody must have ratted them out for them to obtain this information and arrest someone in such a fast manner. Hey, Attorney Banks, in this cybersecurity, do they close these cases in 2 days? In typical cases, a long drawn out process. I was curious in this cybersecurity world.
Oh, in some of these cybersecurity cases, the investigation, can go on for weeks and months. Is that what you mean in terms of the investigation of this series of leaked documents that this 21-year-old gained access to? I mean, this highly classified Pentagon intelligence that related to the war in Ukraine and other information that all countries routinely, if you will, gather even on their close allies. I mean, you don't go posting that on the internet every day because that creates problems, right? But these investigations can take some time to complete. But I mean, this is highly top secret, sensitive, and highly classified information, and just highly problematic. This young man faces, I mean, he's being charged with espionage, right? That can subject him to, if convicted, life in prison, or even the death penalty.
Well, the more I read about this young man, I'm not a death penalty proponent, but here's what, according to the news article, what happened. He was a leader of a group called Discord, D-I-S-C-O-R-D, a chat room. He had about 24 members. The members included people from Russia, Ukraine, and a number of countries in Europe, Asia, and South America, according to the newspaper. So he's sharing the government, the United States of America, top secret with Russia and Ukraine. And what the information he's sharing, top secret information about Ukraine and the United States in relationship with other countries, allegedly. So if this person is guilty of these offenses, this is one of the most damaging release of information that I've heard of. And it's almost like, if this is true, that this person is a traitor. And this is unforgivable misconduct to put at risk to the United States of America. It's a terrible thing. And I hope all this information is not true, and that that no one in the United States will be release information that's so damaging to our country that we'll pledge allegiance to. But we'll wait and see. You know, the way our legal system works, you're not guilty. If you're presumed to be innocent until you're found guilty. Let's see whether or not he's found guilty. And if so, it will be a sad day in America.
This is a huge national security breach. Worked.
Yes. Now,
just again, query, how do you get access to this level of confidential information? Those details have not yet been released, but there is obviously a huge vulnerability that needs to be immediately addressed.
I think that there should be some supervisory liability in this case.
I agree.
If these allegations are true, who is supervising this military process at his in Massachusetts? The federal government, it's not possible for the federal government to monitor everybody in every state at the same time. They rely on a chain of command. The military has a very strict chain of command. So how is it possible that the military officers, his supervisor, allowed him, a 21-year-old, to have access to all this confidential information without being aware of it? What were they doing? Were they asleep at the wheel? So I think if he is guilty of misconduct, then there should be some supervisor liability too. They should also be charged for gross neglect if, in fact, the allegation against this young man is true.
It's my understanding that he spent at least part of his day inside working within a secure facility that prohibits cell phones and any other type of electronic device. So how was he able to either copy the information or take screenshots of this information, because it's housed on government computers?
Shocking. Okay, we have Pierre. Well, you have a question coming for us today, Pierre.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir.
One of the ways that that soldier had access to that information was, my understanding is, he did repair work on the infrastructure, and he was one of the go-to guys that had to fix things. So that would give him access. One way he got access. Now, I heard that on NPR or whatever, but they were talking about how he had access. One of the things is the United States military is relying heavily on Guard and reserve units to handle the cyber load. As a matter of fact, right here in Indiana, up at Muscatattack, or the Urban Training Center, we have, I think, the first cyber battalion in the United States Army or in the Guard right here in Indiana, and they are fully operational and they handle real world missions. So a lot of this stuff is being handled by reservists and National Guardsmen now. So yeah, they really need to get a handle on that. But these guys they're working with the infrastructure, and they come across this information and they see it. So that's how they're getting access to it. And Nate, I was hoping you would get to the there were other issues, of course, the election up there in Chicago and all that, and the Louisville shooting and all of that. And then we got the NRA in town. But, we had two police officers with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department indicted for involuntary manslaughter in the Herman Whitfield case. And I tell you, I just kind of disagree with that. I wish they would have never had to endure that. I watched that 22-minute video, and I can't see what else the police could have done to keep that man from passing away. And hopefully, maybe you guys can talk about that. But I watched that 22-minute body video camera, and I just don't see how the police department can be held responsible for his death. And thank you for taking my call.
Wait a second. I was in trial all week, and I saw the news people at the courthouse, doing my jury trial this week. Because when I do the jury trial, it's not an 8-hour day, it's like a 16-hour day. So I didn't get a chance to watch TV, but I did see the news people down in the court, in the court area, right? But you don't think that in merit charges, what exactly you see on the video that you thought would exonerate the officer? And I don't remember the case itself because, every day I wake up, somebody's died somewhere in Indianapolis. I've been sick of seeing that. I watched the news this morning, and they had somebody shot and killed at 38th and Lafayette. We have a lot of that. And then we have politicians running for office, claim they're going to do something about it, but not realizing that a lot of these events occur between people that know each other. You know, in other words, there are not a lot of these random killing. These, when it comes down to it, people that have grief, and it's kind of tough. So what about this Whitfield case that you think, that what you saw in the video that you think make the officers innocent?
When you watch the video, when the minute the police arrive, they are being professional. They're talking to him. They're, hey, buddy, come on, let's talk. I mean, they are spending a lot of time trying to get him just to comply, and he just becomes more agitated, and then they finally have to tase him, and they get him down, and
wait a second. Stop for a second. You just said something critical. Now back up. You said finally they had to tase him. Weren't there multiple officers there?
Yeah, so it's about 6 officers there.
So you got 6 men and one handicap.
There was a woman there.
Okay, 5 men and a woman. You got 5 men and a woman, and you don't think that 5 men and a woman could restrain a person without shooting them with a taser? I was just curious. You think it's a reasonable use of force to use a taser when you got 6 people who are trained professional against one disabled person? I was just curious.
Yes, in that case, yes, because they were working to try to get him to comply. 6 officers piled on that big man at 300 and some odd pounds and standing 6 foot. They would have smothered him. I'm glad there wasn't 6 officers piled on top of him. I think there were 2 that were trying to get him to comply, and they were using hand towels and everything. You got to watch the video. But my thing is the fact that those 2 officers, I mean, they weren't beating this guy with batons. They weren't choking him out or anything like that. They were trying to restrain him, and I don't know. It needs to be studied. People with medical conditions, and then they're getting tased in a heightened. He's not the first person that got to the hospital with a cardiac arrest and died after being tased. And so that needs to be looked at. But when I look at that video,
well, wait a second. Let me explain to you something very clear. When a person died in police custody, the police officer attend the autopsy at the Marion County Coroner's Office. There's 2 or more police officers that have watched them cut the body open and do it in full autopsy. So they're there and they're in the room when they're doing the autopsy. I'm not guessing about this. I've done a number of these cases. So, but the thing that you said to me that bothers me is that it's a pendulum on the use of force, right? And this guy's naked. He has no weapon. We know that because he has no clothes on, right? So why do you think it's a justified use of force to tase a naked person since they're of zero risk of deadly force against any officer? And there's 6 of them there.
You're making the assumption that he was at zero risk. He was running around in the kitchen. There's knives and all kinds of things. And he looks like he's starting to charge the officers.
Wait a second. Did he grab a knife? Wait a second. Did he grab a knife?
I don't know what he did. And see, that's the thing. I don't know what he had in his hand. I don't think he had anything in his hand, but he was hot. I would encourage everybody to go see. This is the type of stuff you as a lawyer, you deal with when you get people on the jury. I'm not the only one with this opinion. And I'm just saying, if the city offers them a settlement, I hope they take it.
Well, wait a second. It's a criminal case. This is a criminal case. Forget about it. But here's the problem with what you're saying. There's one thing that you're not aware of. The prosecutor's office has been holding officer accountable. Since I've been in this city, I've represented over 400 officers through our law firm. But the one thing that always bothered me is that when I got pulled over by an officer for no reason, and the first thing he did was put his hand on his gun, and I was leaving the golf course. Pissed me off. I filed a complaint against him because in that instance, he escalated something that was a non-issue, you know? And so I think that we have to have officers doing a great job. And I'm a big fan of police officers, but there are some officers that escalate situation and don't handle it correctly. And I'm a firm believer that it's necessary to hold them accountable if they go too far.
Absolutely. I believe in holding out of control cops that go too far. These two weren't the ones. And if you go look at that video, which I'm quite sure a jury's going to look at if it goes that far, I just can't. And then you got the FOP talking about, well, you know what? Unless they're doing something criminal, unless they're a naked man running around in his house going off is not a criminal act. Unless he's doing something criminal, the FOP is saying we shouldn't be called in the first place. And they're saying we shouldn't be even handling mental health calls unless the person who's having the episode has actually done something to harm somebody else or harm themselves. Other than that, they're saying they don't want to show up anymore.
Okay, I got your point. Well, thanks, Pierre. Okay. Next caller, you have a question or comment, James? Go ahead.
James, I live out of town. I live in Cincinnati, and I saw that Whitfield guy where the police, you said like 6, 7 police went in there. They held him down and tased him. To me, that was just evidence speak for itself. I listened to your talk shows, and this guy, Pierre, he said that yesterday. He said in his mind, he said the police did nothing wrong. You have a naked man was alive, and then when the police came, they wheeled him out in a bag. I'm trying to understand what is wrong with you people in Naptown where you let your police murder innocent people, and then you get on the radio for the whole world saying there's nothing wrong. When are we going to start holding people accountable? You had a guy was sleeping in a car, and the police shot him 40 times. And is Pierre saying they did nothing wrong? We saw the video, and the parents had to sue to show the whole video because they wanted to cover up at first. If the evidence is there, why is this guy Pierre running around town saying the police are not doing anything? Is something wrong with people down in Naptown? Thank you.
I can assure you, caller, I live in the city, and we have one of the most intelligent group of residents in the city of Annapolis in the whole country. We have people with substantial IQ. We have a great educational system here. And we have a great prosecutor who charged them with felonies. Ryan Mears is our prosecutor. And so I trust what he's doing. He's been an outstanding prosecutor. And I'm sure that if they did something wrong, justice would hold them accountable. We have jurors in Indianapolis that show up. We have people out of our neighborhoods, they show up and they render verdicts that's consistent with the facts and evidence. One of the disadvantages that most folks have, so we'll make this clear, is that when you are looking at evidence on the internet, that's not the same evidence that the prosecutor has access to. The prosecutor has access to evidence that may not be generally available, and you don't get that evidence until a lot of times it come out in the courtroom because there's evidentiary ruling by the judge, and sometimes you don't get everything, but in order to file charges, they would have vetted the evidence, they would talk to witnesses, conducted that investigation, and once they did that, they filed charges. And most of these cases involving police misconduct, they do obtain conviction. Okay, the next caller. Hello.
Am I the next?
Yes, you are. You're on. Who's speaking?
Okay, I want to make it quick. Number one, I disagree with Pierre. That's number one. Number two, the man from Cincinnati is right. Number three, they didn't want to release the whole cam thing, and that was the issue right there. They knew that it was questionable. Now, you done had all this stuff going on recently, but even George Floyd, that was an embarrassment. And also, when you're dealing with mental illness, schizophrenias and things, a lot of people have been off their meds. They might even have street. Pierre is totally wrong. People working mental, even Central State, they closed the bad boy. But they didn't have as much going on as controversy now. And then people had to take people down every day. So the idea, I'm not saying all police are bad. Some of the police need mental health. You know how hard that job is? Also, what they're saying is the coroner is a lie. Well, the coroner is expert in what he's saying. So who going to stand up for who? The man that died is dead. He was almost 40 years old. He didn't just start getting to be mental illness. So all this fits into the pattern. Let the two and the others, all of them should be accountable. It's a way to help. When it was out of their control, they should have called for backup then from paramedics and whoever else. That's not the way you do it. What they did was because they felt like we can do it. And every time you lose, and even from the beginning, you notice they didn't, when the guys in Memphis did what they did, they showed all the brothers immediately. Anytime there's a reasonable doubt, they're slow. Now they're coming out talking about 2 officers indicted in the killing of a black man. That conversation is coming out last. It's always
Call there something you
tell the truth, the whole truth.
Hey, Call, there's something that's very important.
I bet you they talking about they sorry. There's too much going on. It needs to be handled, and the police, some of them need mental help. Goodbye.
Well, one thing that you should know, and I've been doing this a long time in my 42nd year, the biggest problem I have with the police department now, even under current leadership, is that they withhold critical evidence of misconduct all the freaking time. They withhold critical evidence. In one of the cases I'm doing now, the police investigated a death case caused by another police officer, and they failed to collect the evidence to show the officer misconduct. And it's been driving me crazy. We were able to get part of the evidence because we got involved early on. But here you have a police officer that's clear as day that did such a bad job unless I was involved in the case, we would never be able to pursue justice correctly and hold them accountable. So, so for our caller from Cincinnati, we don't have stupid people in Indianapolis. We have difference of opinion, but on our show, people are allowed to express their opinion. That doesn't mean that we agree with them, but they're allowed to do that. It's called the First Amendment. So we let people call. We get competing reviews on both sides of issues, and it's healthy for a democracy. We're allowed to speak and debate issues, and so I welcome views from both sides. Well, Attorney Banks, that was a mouthful, but the prosecutor, Ryan Mears, has done an excellent job of holding police accountable here in the city. And, we had a case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court where the police officer killed a young man on the east side of Indianapolis. We had video footage to show that they killed the young man to positional asphyxiation, where they put handcuffs on so tight that he couldn't breathe. He couldn't breathe, and they caused his death. They refused to let him have medical care treatment. The U.S. Supreme Court said they had qualified immunity, which was probably one of the worst decisions. Indianapolis have the worst decision in America on qualified immunity because of a strange sort of circumstances with Judge Amy Barrett being elevated to Supreme Court. And because she's from this district, they end up dismissing the Supreme Court case on this issue. So what I'm saying is, I support police officers when they're right, but when they're wrong, they should be held accountable. I even have some cases I've investigated where there were misconduct on the part of some white officer against a black officer. We're investigating a case like that now. So, you have to collect evidence and not make these swift conclusions. I know I said a lot, but Attorney Banks, what's your thoughts?
I think it's all been said on both sides, on all sides of the issue. And of course, I agree that police officers should be held accountable when they are wrong. I believe that with the Tyree Nichols case, we saw the videos being released to the public with all deliberate speed. I think that hopefully sets a precedent for future cases and the concerns that you've raised, Attorney Lee, about that evidence not being promptly and timely disclosed. And I think our discussion also implicates the ongoing issue of, what is reasonable force in these situations? What is the appropriate use of tasers? And the fact that police officers are, in many cases, the statistics show, are responding to situations like mental illness, as the caller stated, or homelessness, for example, citizens that are homeless, and that they're not trained or have, the appropriate expertise to respond to those types of situations. So there's just a whole lot involved, and many of the police reform efforts are attempting to address these issues.
Well, thank you. Now we'll go back to the line. Josephine, you got a question or comment for us today? Hello? Caller? Go ahead, producer. Did we lose the caller?
Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Barely. What's your question or comment today, Joseph?
Mental illness.
Yeah, what about the mental illness?
Sorry?
I didn't hear what your comment. What about the mental illness?
I have a severe mental illness. Hear me?
Yes.
And I know what psychosis is because I've experienced it a long time ago. When I was 21, I was in psychosis. I thought I was going to die quite literally at 5 o'clock. It's like being awake. And so if you ever had a nightmare, you're glad you woke up. But with this was reality to me. I understand what the man was going through. And the lady who was on earlier, she's right. There needs to be more information. Officers, I spoke to some officers on the East Coast about mental health and mental disease, how to approach someone. Yes, if the young man had a gun and he was threatening to kill, I understand that. But the man had no gun. He was naked, and he was psychosis. So that should have been handled better than it was. And I really feel sorry for his family. My heart goes out to them. And I'm not saying they are bad police officers because I know they're not, but they're not trained properly to handle people in psychosis.
Thank you, caller, for that point. Thank you. Your point is well taken.
Well, but see, here's the thing. What one of the calls identified was an escalation of a situation. And so whether you're trained or not in particular disease process, it's about escalation. And why do you have 6 people think that there's a need to go out and tase a naked man? They got batons, they got CS repellent, they have all kind of tools other than shooting an electrical current into the person to alter their heart rate potentially. And that's my concern. There is a a series of things officers can do. And I know this, I represent a lot of officers, and I talk to them all the time. We hire officers to do investigations on many of our cases. So in any event, we're going to see what happens to the case. We'll see whether or not a jury determined that they committed a crime. If so, the courts will hold them accountable. If they're innocent, then they'll be acquitted. And that's my take on it.
As you know, Attorney Lee, there's lots and lots of controversy over the use of tasers. And just based on your experience on both sides, representing officers and prosecuting officers, do you think that there's a need to really focus in on the use of tasers and what the appropriate use should be in these situations where the situation is escalating? It seems to me that there should be some model rules and standards around when it is appropriate to use tasers. And I do know that there's a lot of, individual judgment that may come into play, given the circumstances. But, just based on this huge controversy, I think that your work on both sides could potentially result in improving the state of the situation today with respect to the use of tasers.
Yeah, I got some specific examples because I've had a lot of cases with officers. Like, for example, I had an officer that probably weighed 120 pounds. I had a 275-pound male that was battering another woman, and she tased him. And I'm thinking, good for her. The option would be use of baton, which would have been effective, to shoot him and kill him, which would have been deadly force, or to tase him to get him under control. Well, in that situation, that makes sense, But on the other hand, if the officer was 220 pounds and is a 125 woman who doesn't have a weapon, then he should be able to physically restrain her. So in other words, the use of force got to be measured by the potential harm, the circumstances, is a case-by-case situation. There's not a hard and fast rule, but the one thing that we want to do first is see whether or not the situation can be de-escalated. And that's my take on this. We have a couple of callers still holding, but unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all our. I tell you what we'll do. We'll take one last call for like 1 minute real quick before we close. Okay, Tanya, you have a question or comment for us today?
Yes, my question, I feel the police look at themselves as having authority. I think they use their job and their rank, just to, that's what I'm trying to say, just they're trying to, it's hard for us to go against the police because the police always don't feel like they're right. I'm not sure if I'm getting my point across. I just feel like the police has so much authority over civilians, over us, that we can't really, if we have a comment to say to them, they're going to look as we get smart, want to arrest us. And then this young man that they tased that had nothing on him but naked, that just didn't make sense to me that they would do all the things that they did to that man. Am I making sense?
Yes, you are, ma'am. I fully understand your point of view.
That was all I had. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Tanya, for calling us today. Closing comment, Attorney Banks, before we close out.
We didn't have a chance to talk about the temporary stay. Justice Alito has temporarily blocked the Fifth Circuit's ruling prohibiting the abortion medication. And so the court is expected to rule by Wednesday in that case. And so I'm looking forward to the court's ruling and discussing developments during our show next week.
Well, thank you very much, audience, for listening to our show today. And make sure you join us next week because we didn't get to all our topics today. And we didn't get to all our callers. But don't forget, be safe, and it's time to go out and vote. If you're here in Indianapolis, we have a really contested mayoral primary race going on in our city. We have contested city county races. Go out and vote. Learn what your council people are doing, and learn, I had one council person I supported very strongly in the past, and I'm not supporting him this time because he's done a horrible job for our city, I thought. So learn, educate yourself about what our council people are doing. If they're not doing a good job, vote them out. If they're doing a good job, vote for them. Make sure you vote for the mayor's candidate. Thank you. And I look forward to talking to you next week. And God bless and keep you.